I still remember the night the wind began to sound like a scream. I was sitting in my room in Wilmington, North Carolina, staring out the window at clouds twisting across the sky like something alive. People on the news were already saying her name, Hurricane Melissa, like she was a living thing with hunger in her eyes. Before that storm, my life was simple, predictable, painfully average. I never imagined a nightmare could become the only reason I discovered the one person who would change me forever. I wasn't looking for love, and I sure as hell wasn't looking for tragedy. But sometimes life doesn't wait for you to be ready. It just hits, like a wave that doesn't care whether you drown. That day, the first time I saw Natalie, she was standing outside the Old Pier Diner wearing a dark green jacket, her hair pulled into a messy ponytail, yelling into her phone at someone who clearly wasn't listening. I don't know why I noticed her. Maybe it was the exhaustion in her voice, or the way she held herself as if she was used to pretending she was fine. She hung up, dropped onto the bench, and stared out at the churning water. The wind tossed her hair, and even from a distance I could see something in her eyes. Loneliness. Not the quiet kind, no. This was the type that clings to your bones. I don't know what got into me, but I walked over and sat on the bench beside her, like my body moved before my brain could stop it. "You look like you just cursed out a telemarketer," I said, attempting humor. Her head snapped toward me and she scowled, but only for a second. Worse, my ex. The kind that acts like a hurricane existed solely to inconvenience him. I smirked. Melissa might disagree. For the first time, she cracked a tiny laugh, and God, it changed her whole face. She had the kind of smile that hits slow, like sunrise on water. For a moment, the storm didn't matter. She didn't know me, and I didn't know her. But something about that moment felt eerily inevitable, like we were two people who didn't just meet, we collided. Her eyes narrowed at the waves. "They say Melissa's tracking north, getting stronger. I don't like storms." "Who does?" I replied. "Some people," she whispered, "storm chasers, crazy people who want to get as close to death as possible just to feel alive." She paused. "I'm not one of them. I don't want chaos. I just want peace for once." Something in her voice cut deeper than it should have. I realized she wasn't talking about the weather anymore. We sat there until the wind picked up and sand swirled across the walkway. Before leaving, I asked her name. "Natalie," she said. "You?" "Evan." She nodded, like she wanted to remember it. The next day, warnings blasted from every radio and TV. People boarded windows, stores ran out of water, gas stations backed up for miles. But all I could think about was that girl on the pier. I checked the diner again that afternoon. She wasn't there. The sky bruised purple and gray, and gulls scattered inland. My phone buzzed with evacuation notices, but my mind buzzed with only one thought: I hope she's safe. That evening, rain hammered the town in sharp, violent sheets. Power flickered. I sat in my darkening room, alone, listening to the storm roll in like an army. Wind howled between the houses, rattling the walls, and in the flashes of lightning, I felt that strange electric sensation people describe right before something life-altering happens. I checked my phone again. Nothing. No messages, no alerts from her, which didn't even make sense because we weren't anything. She was just a girl, a stranger, really. But my chest ached with a worry I couldn't explain. Then, a notification lit my screen. A local emergency thread. Someone posted, "Girl trapped near Harbor Street, floodwater rising fast, alone, asking for help." Lightning cracked open the sky, and for a split second, I swear I felt my heart stop. Harbor Street. That wasn't far from the pier. My hands moved before my fear could talk me out of it. I grabbed my flashlight, my jacket, and ran into the storm. When I stepped outside, the wind punched me with brutal force. Rain slashed sideways, sirens wailed in the distance, streetlights flickered, threatening to go dark for good. I pushed forward, soaked within seconds, shoes splashing into rising water. Branches ripped from trees, signs bent to the ground, and broken glass glittered in the gutter. The world looked unreal, like a city drowning in its own reflection. By the time I reached Harbor Street, half the road was already swallowed by water. Waves, actual waves, rolled down the asphalt, and there she was, Natalie, standing on the second-floor balcony of an old rental house, clutching the railing, soaked and terrified. The lower floor was already underwater. "Evan!" she shouted through the storm, disbelief and fear twisting her voice. Lightning exposed her face, pale, shaking, desperate. "Hold on! I'm getting you out of there!" I yelled. "You shouldn't have come!" she screamed back. "It's not safe!" "No one's safe!" I yelled, "but I'm not leaving you!" She stared at me through sheets of rain, and even through the chaos, I saw something shift in her eyes, fear giving way to something dangerously close to hope. That's the moment we stopped being strangers, and the moment we made the worst and best decision of our lives. Natalie disappeared into the darkness of the balcony as I fought my way toward the house. The current pushed against my legs, almost knocking me off my feet. The street was no longer a street, it was a river, rushing fast, dragging trash cans, branches, and pieces of shattered wood along with it. I gripped a mailbox for balance and forced myself forward, step by trembling step, refusing to let the storm decide for me. Every second mattered. Natalie was trapped, and the water was climbing. I reached the front steps, or at least where the front steps would have been. I plunged into the cold flood up to my waist and sloshed through the doorway, pushing inside as floating debris bumped against me. The house creaked like it was screaming. I could hear the violent wind tearing at the walls, howling through every crack. I moved by flashlight, sweeping its beam across the flooded living room. Chairs floated like bodies. A table was overturned, bobbing in the water. I found the staircase half submerged and began climbing, each step slick and shaking beneath my feet. "Evan!" Natalie called. Her voice was thin, almost swallowed by the storm. "I'm coming!" I shouted. When I reached the top of the stairs, she was waiting, drenched from head to toe, her eyes filled with terrified disbelief. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I don't know what I expected. Maybe fear, maybe panic. But what I saw was a strange relief, like she hadn't realized how badly she needed someone until that second. "You're insane," she said, shivering. "So I've been told." She let out a shaky breath that might have been a laugh, then threw her arms around me, clinging to me like I was the only solid thing left in the world. I held her tightly, feeling her heartbeat pounding against mine. For a moment, I forgot about the storm outside, the flood, the danger. There was just her, warm and trembling in my arms. "We have to go," I said. "Now. The water's already up to the windows downstairs." She nodded, pulling back. "There's a back window that leads to the roof, but I don't know if it's safe." "Nothing is safe anymore," I said, "but it's our best shot." We made our way down the hallway, the house groaning under the assault of the wind. I could feel it shifting, like the whole structure was about to tear apart. Natalie led me to a small bedroom. Rain leaked from the ceiling, pattering onto the soaked mattress. She pointed to a window that rattled violently against its frame. "Once we climb out, we can move across the roof and jump to the shed next door. From there, the ground might be higher." "Might?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. She glared weakly. "Do you have a better plan?" Not really." Together, we forced the window open, and the wind nearly ripped it from our grip. Rain blasted into the room, soaking us even more. I climbed out first, gripping the shingles, slick as ice beneath my hands. Natalie followed, and for a moment we crawled across the roof against the roaring hurricane like two insects clinging to the earth for mercy. The sky above was a violent swirl of black and electric white. Thunder pounded so loud it rattled my teeth.
When we reached the edge of the roof, we peered down at the shed below. It wasn't far, maybe a 6-foot drop, but the wind made everything unpredictable. "I'll go first," I said. "Then you jump. I'll catch you." She hesitated. "Evan, you trust me?" right?" I asked. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for a second the storm fell away. "Yes," she whispered. "I do." I jumped. My feet hit the shed roof, knees buckling, but I kept my balance. I looked up at her and nodded. She braced herself, closed her eyes, and leaped. For a horrifying moment, her foot slipped on the wet shingles and she screamed, but I caught her, pulling her into my chest. We didn't move for a moment. We just breathed. Alive. Together. But survival didn't give us time to celebrate. A loud metallic groan tore through the air, followed by a sickening crack. We looked back in disbelief as the house we had just escaped began to collapse inward. The entire structure buckled, folding into the flood like paper. Natalie gasped and grabbed my arm. "If we stayed 5 more minutes..." "We didn't," I said. "We keep moving. Come on." We slid down from the shed, landing in knee-high water that surged around us with relentless force. Sirens wailed somewhere in the distance, barely audible beneath the wind. Streetlights flickered, then finally surrendered to the darkness as the power grid failed. The only illumination left was lightning. Sharp, violent flashes that turned the flooded world into a nightmare frozen in stuttering snapshots. We pushed forward, leaning into the wind. We didn't know exactly where we were going, just inland, just anywhere higher. We passed abandoned cars, floating garbage bins, shattered windows, and pieces of broken roofs. Natalie stumbled, and I caught her again, tightening my grip around her waist. "How are you so calm?" she shouted over the storm. "I'm not," I said. "I'm terrified, but I'm not letting you die in this." She stared at me through the rain, and something in her expression softened. "Nobody ever stayed for me before." "Well," I said, forcing a breath, "get used to it." We found an overturned SUV lodged against a tree and climbed on top to catch our breath. The water below rushed with violent force, carrying pieces of people's lives away. Family photos, children's toys, furniture, clothing, memories. Natalie hugged her knees to her chest, shivering violently. "We need shelter," she said through chattering teeth. "We'll find one," I promised, even though I wasn't sure I believed it. I scanned the area, lightning illuminating the drowned neighborhood in white bursts. Most buildings were either destroyed or already overtaken by the flood. But then I saw it. A school. Sitting near the end of the street on slightly higher ground, the water not yet reaching its doors. "There," I pointed. "We can make it." We slid back into the current, fighting our way through the black water. Every step was a battle, every gust of wind a slap. At one point, the current nearly took Natalie off her feet, and I yanked her back just in time. Her fingers laced into mine so tightly I could feel her nails digging into my skin. When we finally reached the school steps, we collapsed against the cold concrete, gasping for air. The wind roared above us, ripping signs and branches from the landscape like a monster tearing at its prey. I pushed the doors open, and we stumbled inside, dripping, freezing, exhausted. The school was dark, silent, echoing. Our footsteps sloshed down the hallway as we searched for a classroom, a closet, anything with a door to block the wind and rain. We found a storage room lined with metal shelves and boxes of old gym equipment. I shut the door, and suddenly, the world outside became a distant roar instead of a scream. The silence was so heavy it felt unreal. Natalie slid down the wall, hugging herself. I knelt beside her and wrapped my jacket around her shoulders. "We're okay," I whispered. "We made it." She looked up, eyes glassy with tears she'd held back for too long. "No," she said softly. "We escaped one moment. But this storm isn't done. You heard them. Melissa's going to be worse by morning." "We'll face morning when it comes," I said. "We're alive tonight. That's enough." She stared at me, breathing unevenly. "Why do you care so much? You don't even know me." I swallowed. "Maybe not, but I know how it feels to be alone when everything hurts. I'm not letting you go through that again." Her voice broke as she whispered, "Thank you." She leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder. I wrapped my arm around her, pulling her close. In that dark storage room with the hurricane clawing at the world outside, something in us changed. We weren't just two people caught in a storm anymore. We were a lifeline for each other. As she drifted into an exhausted sleep against me, I stayed awake, listening to the wind trying to tear the world apart, knowing that the worst was still coming. But I also knew this: I would face all of it, for her, with her, no matter what waited for us when daylight returned. I didn't sleep at all that night. Natalie rested with her head on my shoulder, breathing softly, unaware of how many times I flinched at every groan of the building. The school walls trembled against the force of Hurricane Melissa, and each gust of wind sounded like a scream trying to claw its way inside. The emergency alerts on my dying phone repeated the same words: catastrophic, unprecedented, life-threatening. Sitting there in the dark, with the smell of floodwater and rusted metal surrounding us, I began to understand why people say nature doesn't attack, it devours. Natalie stirred awake around dawn, though there was no real sunrise, just a bleak gray glow filtering through the cracked door window. "Is it still bad?" she whispered. "It's worse," I said. The wind howled through the hallways, and somewhere in the building, something metal crashed to the floor. Natalie gripped my hand. She was trying to stay strong, but her voice shook. "What if we don't get out of here?" "We will," I said firmly, even though fear clawed at my own throat. "We didn't survive the night just to die in the morning." We forced ourselves to move. We opened the door and stepped into a hallway covered in broken ceiling tiles, scattered papers, and puddles of rain blown in from shattered windows. The storm had breached the school overnight. The floor was slick, and the air felt colder. As we walked, we both froze at the same moment. The water was rising again, steadily creeping down the hallway, inch by inch. "We need to get to higher ground. Roof access. There has to be a maintenance ladder somewhere." We searched room after room, our nerves unraveling each time the building moaned. The wind was so violent now that the doors were impossible. We could hear doors slamming against their hinges, metal bending. When we finally found a maintenance door, Natalie grabbed my arm before I could open it. "Wait," she said softly. "What if there's nothing left out there?" I looked at her, seeing every fear she tried to bury in her voice. "We face it together," I said, "no matter what's out there." She nodded, and I pushed the door open. A narrow staircase spiraled upward, lit only by thin cracks of daylight. Dripped up from above, each drop echoing. The air grew colder and harsher as we climbed, until finally, we pushed open the hatch and crawled onto the roof. The world had changed. Our town, our entire coastline looked like a shattered relic of itself. Floodwater swallowed streets, rooftops, and cars. Houses lay broken and scattered like toys. The sky churned in violent shades of black and sickly green, and the wind felt sharp enough to cut skin. I held Natalie close as she stared, her breath trembling. I had never seen her look so small.
"We can't stay exposed up here," she shouted over the roar. "The wind will throw us off." I scanned the rooftops until I spotted something, a nearby municipal building with a tall antenna tower, and more importantly, a helipad. If any rescue teams were flying during breaks in the storm, they'd go there first. "We have to get to that building," I pointed. Her eyes followed my finger. "That's at least half a mile away. Through this?" "We don't have a choice," I said. "The water inside is rising. If we stay, we drown." For a second, she just stared at me, and I could see every emotion inside her colliding at once: fear, exhaustion, disbelief, and something deeper. Finally, she whispered, "Okay, lead the way." We climbed down the far side of the school, using the gutter pipe for support. The wind slammed into us, pushing us sideways. Natalie screamed once when her foot slipped, but I caught her and pulled her back against me. I held her face for a moment, forcing her to look at me. "Don't look at the storm," I said. "Just look at me. One step at a time, okay?" She nodded, breath shaking, and we continued. Reaching the ground again, we waded through waist-deep water that surged with debris. A floating section of fencing drifted toward her, and I yanked her out of the way. We navigated past collapsed rooftops, overturned trucks, shattered glass, and fallen power lines that hissed ominously. Once, in the distance, we saw something that looked like a body tangled in branches, but Natalie turned her face into my chest before she could see more. I held her as tightly as I could, shielding her from a reality that would haunt both of us anyway. By the time we reached the municipal building, we were exhausted, half frozen, and shaking. The front doors were jammed, so we scaled a fallen utility cart and climbed through a blown-out window. Inside was chaos. Dark hallways, overturned furniture, smashed equipment, and water pooling across the floor. We followed emergency signs in the dim light, making our way up flight after flight of stairs. The entire building shook with every gust of wind. And then, halfway up the final staircase, we heard it. A rumbling, groaning sound that didn't belong to wind or thunder. The walls trembled, pipes vibrated. Natalie grabbed my arm, eyes wide. "What is that?" I realized it a moment before it happened. "Breach!" I screamed. "The storm surge! Run!" But we were too late. A tidal wall of black water exploded through the lower floors, tearing through hallways, swallowing everything in its path. The roar of it was monstrous, alive. It rushed upward, up the stairwell, surging toward us. Natalie screamed, and I threw myself toward her, pushing her up the stairs. We ran, slipping, gasping, fighting for every step as the water chased us like a living beast determined to drag us under. We burst through the rooftop door and slammed it behind us. The impact hit on the other side a second later, rattling the metal violently. Natalie collapsed to her knees, sobbing, but I grabbed her and forced her up. "Nat, listen to me. We made it. We're on the roof. Just a little more." She nodded through tears, and together we stumbled toward the helipad. Rain stabbed at us. Wind shoved us sideways. We dropped to our hands and crawled the last few feet. We huddled behind a steel barrier, clinging to it, our fingers numb and white. For several minutes we just held on. The world roared. The building shuddered. And I whispered into her soaked hair, "I'm not letting go. Not ever." She turned her face toward me, eyes swollen, voice trembling. "I don't want to die, Evan. Not after meeting you. Not after this." "You're not going to," I whispered. "You hear me? I didn't come this far to lose you." Then, through the raging wind, we heard it. A distant thumping, rhythmic and mechanical. At first I thought I was imagining it, but then Natalie's eyes widened. "A helicopter?" she gasped. "Evan, look!" Through the storm clouds, a rescue helicopter emerged, its spotlight cutting across the rooftop. I stood, waving my arms, screaming for help. The helicopter fought the wind, tilting dangerously, but it lowered closer. A rope ladder dangled through the rain. When the rescue workers signaled us, I grabbed Natalie's hand. "You go first." She shook her head violently. "No, not leaving you." I cupped her face, forcing her to meet my eyes. "I'm right behind you, I promise." She stared at me for one agonizing second, then nodded. I helped her onto the ladder. The wind nearly ripped her away, but she held tight. I waited, heart pounding, soaked and exhausted, every second stretching into eternity. When she reached the helicopter, I grabbed the ladder and began climbing. Below me, the ocean swallowed the streets. The roof trembled, pieces breaking away. The storm clawed at me from the back, trying to pry me loose. Halfway up the ladder, a gust hit so hard I almost slipped. Natalie screamed my name from above, reaching down even though she was strapped in. "Evan, hold on!" I gritted my teeth, muscles burning, and climbed until hands grabbed me and pulled me into the aircraft. The hatch slammed shut. I collapsed beside her, shaking, drenched, and trembling with adrenaline and disbelief. She threw her arms around me, sobbing into my chest. I held her, burying my face in her hair as the helicopter lifted us away from the drowning skeleton of our town. We didn't speak for a long time. We just held each other while the storm raged beneath us. Later, in the shelter, wrapped in blankets and surrounded by other survivors, she rested her head against my shoulder, eyes closed but finally peaceful. The storm outside was still roaring, but inside, for the first time, she wasn't alone, and neither was I. When she finally looked up at me, her voice was soft, raw, and honest. "Evan, thank you for not giving up on me, for staying." I brushed a strand of hair from her face and whispered, "I'm not going anywhere." She smiled, tired, bruised, tear-streaked, but real. Then she leaned in and kissed me, and storm or not, the world finally went quiet. Hurricane Melissa destroyed our town, changed our lives, and nearly swallowed us whole. But it also brought us to each other. And sometimes, surviving the darkest nights is what makes the morning worth living for. And as the winds died and the floodwaters began to fall, I realized something. I didn't just survive a hurricane. I found the one person I'd face every storm with for the rest of my life.